Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. I'm back again today doing another video. The subject of today's video is going to be on my predictions for the 2019 NBA playoffs. I am going to go through each series in the first round, then my picks for the second round, conference finals, and I'm going to say who I think will win, how many games the series will be, and basically why I think it'll go that way. So without much further ado, let's get into it. So first I will read off the seedings for each conference and then I will get into the individual series themselves. So in the East, we have as the 1 seed Milwaukee, the 2 seed Toronto, 3 is Philadelphia, 4 is Boston, 5 is Indiana, 6 is Brooklyn, 7 is Orlando, and 8 is Detroit. In the West, we have the 1 seeded Warriors, the 2 seeded Denver, 3 is Portland, 4 is Houston, 5 is Utah, 6 Oklahoma City, 7 San Antonio, and 8 is the Los Angeles Clippers. So I'm going to go through the Eastern Conference first round first, then the Western Conference first round, and then the second round for each, and so on and so forth. So in the East, first off, Milwaukee versus Detroit. Detroit has Blake Griffin, they have Andre Drummond, and besides that, they really have nothing. When Reggie Jackson is your third best player, you're looking poor, despite whoever your two best players are, even if they're all-star caliber players. Milwaukee will be missing Malcolm Brogdon for this first series, and Mirotic might come and play the whole series, or he might only play a couple games in the first round. But I think regardless, they'll still have um, Chris Middleton, Eric Bledsoe, Brook Lopez, Ilyasova, the Greek Freak, George Hill. So they'll still have the majority of what they need for their core to be performing well. And so I think that being said, I have Milwaukee taking this in probably 5 games. I think Detroit may steal like game 3 when they go back home to Palace of Auburn Hills, but I think besides that, Milwaukee's pretty easily got a handle on this series. Now for the 2 versus 7, Toronto versus Orlando, I see this one being a pretty clean sweep. I think that Toronto just has a much more talented team with a starting lineup looking like Kyle Lowry, Danny Green, Kawhi Leonard, Pascal Siakam, and either Serge Ibaka or Marc Gasol, depending on who they want to start at center and bring the other one off the bench. It's a really talented team, and then the bench is still pretty deep too. You've got one of those guys between Gasol and Serge coming off the bench. You've also got OG and Anunoby, who's pretty good, and Fred VanVleet. So you've got a pretty good bench as well. And then for Orlando, you got Vucevic, who I think will be pretty well neutralized by the bigs of Toronto, but he is a really good player. And then you've got Aaron Gordon, who I think will also be pretty much neutralized by Pascal Siakam. And Evan Fournier isn't really as good as Kawhi Leonard on the wings, but that's who's going to be guarding him. So I think he'll have a tough time being guarded by Kawhi. So I just don't really see any way Orlando makes any noise in this series. So I see them losing in 4 games. Next, we have the 3 seeded 76ers versus the 6 seeded Nets. And I see this one being the best series of the first round, possibly, or one of the best series of the first round. I think it'll go 6 games. I think Philadelphia will win, but I think Brooklyn will put up quite a fight, and I think we will be going into Game 5 with the 2-2 series tie. If you don't know, Joel Embiid will be missing the entire first round, and so I think it'll be very interesting to see how Philadelphia plays and plans without him. So Philadelphia's starting lineup for this is probably going to look something like Ben Simmons, JJ Redick, Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris, and Boban Marjanovic, and then the Nets will have their usual suspects of Spencer Dinwiddie, D'Angelo Russell, Caris LeVert, Joe Harris, DeMarre Carroll, Jarrett Allen, all those sorts of guys. I don't really know what their lineup configuration will be. I think they'll probably have uh, D'Angelo Russell at point with Caris LeVert at shooting guard, probably Spencer Dinwiddie coming off the bench, Joe Harris at shooting or small forward, then probably Rondae Hollis Jefferson at power forward and Jarrett Allen at center, with then again Dinwiddie and DeMarre Carroll off the bench. But they're a good young team. They're fun, and I don't think they're really afraid of anybody because nothing is really expected of them, so they're not afraid to fail. And then we've got the 4 and the 5 matchup, which will be Boston and the Pacers. And I think despite not having Victor Oladipo, this Pacers team is going to fight hard. And I see this being a 6-game series as well. I think that the Pacers have actually kept pace, no pun intended, with what their expected wins was, even when they had Oladipo, and they've been doing that without him now for roughly half the season. Um, and so I think that they can still be a very threatening team. Basically, Bojan Bogdanovic is their best player right now, averaging around 18 points per game, but they're also getting good contributions from guys like Miles Turner, Domantas Sabonis, Darren Collison, um, Thaddeus Young. So they're still a team that can make some noise and push the Celtics pretty hard. So those are my winners for the East for the first round. Milwaukee, Toronto, Philadelphia, Boston, the top 4 seeds. Nothing too surprising. In the West, with the Warriors versus the Clippers, I have the Warriors winning that in probably around 5 games, maybe 6, but probably 5 if I had to put my money on it. I think the Clippers are a good team, and they're a lot like the Nets actually. I feel like in that they're not really afraid of anybody, and they play really hard, and they're not afraid to lose, and they feel like they're sort of playing it with house money, in that they didn't expect to get to the playoffs, so they're not going to be afraid of whoever they face. And so I think you have these players like Lou Williams, Danilo Gallinari, and Montrezl Harrell. Excuse me, I was having a memory lapse for a second there. But those guys are really good players, and they aren't nearly as good as the Warriors players, but they'll make them work hard to get those wins. Denver versus San Antonio. I see this being a 7-game series. I see San Antonio pushing Denver pretty hard, but I do see Denver winning. I think Denver actually, despite having a pretty good record, I think we're going to see some cracks in their armor here. I think that despite having a good regular season, they don't really know how to win in the playoffs. And despite being the 2 seed, they did kind of cool down just a little bit down the stretch. And so I expect San Antonio, which is basically at full strength right now, besides DeJounte Murray, they've been playing pretty well and they had a 9-game winning streak very recently. And so I see them doing really well and pushing them to 7 games. So for the next matchup, Portland as the 3 versus Oklahoma City as the 6. I see OKC winning this series in 6 games. Portland is missing their third best player in Yusuf Nurkic, and I just don't think they have enough complementary talent besides their backcourt of CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard to challenge in this series, I think. Um, so I think you're definitely going to have Russell Westbrook guarding Dame, but then you're probably going to have Paul George guarding CJ McCollum, and I think he's going to really struggle because he's going to be a 6'3 guy being guarded by a 6'10 guy, and I think that's going to create problems for Portland, and I don't really think they have much on offense besides those 2 guys, especially if they don't have Nurkic. Like I don't really put much faith in Evan Turner or Rodney Hood to do much for him. Enes Kanter is a good player, but he's such a liability on defense. Whatever he gives you on offense is basically negated by his porous defense. So I don't see them winning. And OKC, just as the much more experienced team, I feel like, yes, Portland has been to the playoffs a lot, but they're always losing in the first round. And I think despite OKC losing more recently in the first round, I still think they're a bit more battle tested. So I am taking OKC in 6 games. And then Houston versus Utah, the 4 and the 5 matchup. These are the complete clashing of play styles. Houston, very fast and really quick, and like their pace is super high. And Utah is a much more slow, grinded out defensive team who wants to play in the half court. And they're very much like the grit and grind Grizzlies, but in just that they like half court offense a lot and they like playing slow and playing the defense a lot. So I think that these two will be an interesting matchup in that just the styles are so different. But I think they did face last year, and Houston won pretty easily. I think in four or 5 games. And I see this series being about 6 games, just because I think Houston's a little bit worse this year. But it still should be interesting to see the styles clash. Okay, so for the West, I have Golden State winning in 5, Denver winning in 7, OKC winning in 6, and Houston winning in 6. So let's go to the second round. In the East, I have Milwaukee matching up with Boston, and I have Milwaukee winning that series in 6 games. I think by this point, Malcolm Brogdon is supposed to be back and fully healthy. They said they were going to hold him out of the first round just so he can be completely back to himself. Uh, Mirotic will be back and fully healthy by then, so you'll have the Bucks being at full power. I think that the Celtics will just not be able to flip the switch as easily as they think that they can. I don't think I don't think the young guys will be able to do that really as easily. Jason Tatum is still going to be shaken up from his injury. He will probably still be playing, but I don't think he'll completely be himself, which I think will hurt the Celtics offense. Marcus Smart is expected to miss at a minimum the first and second round, so he will be out. So that'll be a big blow to them. And I think they're just going to be lacking a little bit of depth without Marcus Smart, and their Jason Tatum won't completely be himself. And I think the team just won't have what it needs to get past the Bucks. But I feel like it'll still be a 6-game series because I trust the Celtics have enough talent to at least get them that. So I'm going to say Milwaukee in 6. And then in the other matchup, Toronto versus Philly, I like Philly actually to beat Toronto. I think that's going against what most people would predict, but Philly will have a healthy Joel Embiid back by this point. And I think when I just look up and down the matchups, I like the matchups for uh, I like them for Philly a lot more than I like them for Toronto. So I think you've got like Ben Simmons versus Kyle Lowry. I think Ben Simmons is definitely the one who's going to dominate that matchup. I think you've got Joel Embiid versus either Serge Ibaka or Marc Gasol, and I think despite Toronto having 2 good players at that position, I still trust Joel Embiid to be better than both those guys. I think you could make an argument Tobias Harris and Pascal Siakam is going to be kind of like a wash. Like they're pretty even players, and then I think um, Kawhi will get the best of Jimmy Butler, but Jimmy Butler's still an all-star caliber player, so it's not going to be a huge discrepancy. Um, and then you look at like JJ Redick versus Danny Green. I think JJ is a slightly better player, but Danny Green is a better defender too, so that is sort of a wash. But that being said, I see Philly just being the better team. They don't have as much depth, but I just think they have the star power. And the Ben Simmons matchup will be interesting versus Kyle Lowry. I wonder if they'll do something like put Danny Green on Ben Simmons and then have Kyle Lowry guard JJ Redick. That's likely what they'll do. But even Ben Simmons still has 3 inches and some weight on Danny Green, so he'll still have a matchup advantage as far as size. Um, so I like Philadelphia to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. Probably going 7 games with Toronto, I would say. In the West, we're going to have Golden State going up against the Rockets in the second round. I see this being 6 games. I see Houston losing. I think they're not as good of a team as they were last year, and um, despite Golden State being a little bit weaker this year, I think they're still basically the same team. And I think because Houston has regressed, they're probably only going to be able to push the Warriors to 6 games instead of 7 like last year. Despite even having a healthy Chris Paul, I just think that the lack of some players like not PJ Tucker, but lacking Trevor Ariza, I think is actually going to be a bigger deal than they realize. They have done a good job of coming up with random pieces to kind of replace the guys they lost and be just as good, but they won 65 games last year. They won 53 this year. I think they're going to perform like a 53 win team would, and they're going to lose in the second round. The only thing they've got going for them is they're not afraid of the Warriors whatsoever, so that's a good thing to have on your side. And then in the other side, the second round matchup will be the Nuggets versus OKC. And I see OKC winning this in 7 games, grinding out the win. I think, again, Denver's lack of experience will hurt them here. I think I think their 2 best players are equal or better than Denver's best player. I think that I'd say Westbrook and Paul George are at least equal to Nikola Jokic or even better than him. And then I think the inexperience of like Jamal Murray, Gary Harris, Will Barton, that might hurt them a little bit getting deeper into these playoffs matchups where you're just seeing the same team over and over. I trust that Steven Adams would be sufficiently able to rough up Nikola Jokic, and so I don't know. I just am rolling with OKC on this one. I think that they're gonna play a good brand of basketball against Denver and gonna be able to play a style that disrupts their high flying offense. That leads us to the Eastern Conference Finals, which would be Milwaukee versus Philly. And I know it might be controversial, but I see Philly winning this one. I again just I like their star power. I don't get who's gonna guard Ben Simmons, and I mean probably the Greek Freak, honestly. He'll guard Ben Simmons, and then you'll have Eric Bledsoe guarding JJ Redick and Malcolm Brogdon guarding Jimmy Butler, I guess. But then I think that um, Jimmy Butler has a distinct advantage if he's being guarded by Malcolm Brogdon. And I guess you could say maybe you have Chris Middleton guard Jimmy Butler, but then you have to have Malcolm Brogdon guarding the 6'9" Tobias Harris when Malcolm Brogdon's 6'5". I don't really like that. Tobias Harris is also going to be bigger than him. I think with the five guys Philly has, they're going to create some sort of a matchup problem for Milwaukee. I also think that Brook Lopez cannot hold a candle on defense to guarding Joel Embiid, and I think Embiid's going to have his way down there in the paint. I don't really, and Milwaukee doesn't really have a guy that they can put on Embiid. Like maybe you say, oh, put in Pau Gasol, but Pau Gasol isn't any good at defense anymore. DJ Wilson is 6'9", Embiid is 7'1", so I don't really see him being able to do anything. DJ Wilson's also significantly smaller. I think he's like 6'9", 240, so I don't really see him being able to do much. So I see Philly winning this. I don't know. I just like their matchups better. When you really break it down, I don't see Philly losing that matchup in a 7-game series. I think the Greek Freak is going to have his way with them, but I think at the same time, on the other end of the court, uh, Joel Embiid's going to have his way with Brook Lopez, and then pick one of the four between Redick, Simmons, uh, Butler, and Tobias Harris. One of them is going to have their ways with one of their defenders because at the end of the day, uh, they have that height advantage with Ben Simmons being a 6'10" point guard. That creates big matchup problems. And I think if he's guarded by Bledsoe, he's going to rip up Bledsoe. And I think if they transition to having somebody else guard him, you're going to end up with Malcolm Brogdon guarding a guy who's 3 to 4 inches taller than him and being outmatched. So I have Philly winning this, and getting to the finals. And then in the East, I think we've got Golden State, or the West, excuse me, Golden State versus OKC. I see Golden State winning this in 6 games. I think OKC puts up a good fight. I think it's a really emotional series. I think it's a really good series in that Westbrook's going to be giving it his all. He finally gets to face Durant in a playoff series. Paul George, I expect to see him in full force, and I think he's having the best season of his career, and he's going to show it to us. I think Steven Adams actually is probably going to rough up DeMarcus Cousins quite a bit. I think the places that we're going to see the advantages for Golden State are going to be who's going to guard Clay. Alex Abrines, I don't really trust. Tyler Ferguson, I don't really trust. I think Klay Thompson is going to go off in that Western Conference Finals if they face OKC. And then Draymond will really be a non-factor at this point, but I figure I should mention him too. So I have them winning in 6, and so I have the finals being Golden State versus Philadelphia, and I have Golden State winning this in 6 games. So I think Philly again creates the matchup problem with having Ben Simmons at point guard, but I think what Golden State probably does is this: they probably put Kevin Durant on Ben Simmons, and then at shooting guard they'll put Steph on JJ Redick, Klay Thompson on Jimmy Butler, and I think the key there is that Jimmy Butler's 6'8", Klay Thompson is 6'6", and a better defender than Malcolm Brogdon. Even though Malcolm Brogdon is a very good defender, I think Klay Thompson could handle guarding Jimmy Butler better than he could. So I think that from that perspective, it won't be as much of a matchup problem. And then you'll have Draymond guarding Tobias Harris, and basically the centers guarding each other. And so Golden State is big enough having Durant basically be a 7-footer that it's not as big of a problem having him guard Ben Simmons. And so I think also having their team be a little bit bigger, like I think Eric Bledsoe is only 6'1", but Steph is 6'3", so he matches up with Redick a little bit better. Clay is taller than Malcolm Brogdon, so he matches up with Butler a little bit better. And then Draymond is a better defender than I would say Draymond's a better defender than Chris Middleton at this point in their careers, even though Draymond has regressed a bit. And Joel Embiid's probably going to have his way with DeMarcus Cousins, but I think that at the same time, who's going to guard Durant in this series? Because I don't really see Jimmy Butler doing that great of a job of it, honestly. And I don't think Ben Simmons is really going to want to be able, or isn't really going to be able to chase Steph Curry around for this whole series. So I see the Warriors winning in 6, but it being a good battle. That's all I got, folks. Hope you enjoyed the video. Leave your predictions below if you want to, or comment on what you think is wrong with mine or right with mine, and I hope you guys have a good day. Bye.